What sort of triangle is this? Well, who knows? It looks like a right angled triangle, but there's nothing to say that it is. Now it is. What about this? Well, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, and if I add these together, I get 25, which is the square of the largest side. So we've used Pythagoras the other way around. This is a right angled triangle since Pythagoras works. What about this? Well, it's not a right angled triangle, so you might be thinking sine rule or cosine rule, but always be on the lookout for an isosceles triangle. An isosceles triangle can be made into a right angled triangle, but this is only true if it is isosceles, since in that case we do know we can split the base 50-50. And so here we have we've made a right angled triangle. Because it was isosceles, we know for a fact this 8 centimeters splits into 4 centimeters and 4 centimeters. This wouldn't work with any other triangle. It must be isosceles. But this is a triangle that's definitely not right angled. So we know we're on for either the sine rule or the cosine rule. Now the sine rule depends on knowing the angle and an opposite length. And that is not the case here. We know an angle, a length but not the angle, a length but not the angle, and an angle but not the length. So this isn't the sine rule. So we're going to use the cosine rule. Now it might sound obvious, but you've got to know the cosine rule to be able to use it, so you've got to be able to write this down. And in case it's an unknown angle that you need to find, you've got to be able to rearrange this for cos A. The way I look at it is this. I subtract this from both sides, and I'll add this to both sides, thus swapping them around. If you can remember that one fact to start off, then it's plain sailing, because now to get the cos A on its own, I'll just divide both sides by 2bc. And we're done. The next thing is you're going to label the triangle. It's the same whether using the sine or the cosine rule. Always label the unknown that you're being asked to find as A. And in this case, I'm going to pretend it's this that I'm being asked to find. The angles are capitals, and the sides opposite lengths, they're lowercase. So the second thing is you need to recognize that you are going to use the cosine rule. You need to be able to write down the two versions of the cosine rule. You need to label the triangle. At this point, it's straightforward. We simply substitute our values into the appropriate formula. And I always do this, as you know. And this is exactly how you can do it on the calculator, and then I'll simply put in my values. Put that in and you'll get the value of a squared. And don't forget that you haven't found a, you found a squared. So the answer you get here, you're going to need to take the square root of. So here's another triangle. We've been asked to find an angle. It's certainly not a right angled triangle. It's not isosceles, so we can't make it into a right angled triangle. So it's either the sine or the cosine rule. But because we haven't got a known angle and corresponding length, it can't be the sine rule, so it's the cosine rule. So I'm going to write down my formula for the cosine rule. And I'm going to rearrange it for cos A. And if you've got these two equations in front of you before you even begin the question, again, you're starting from a very solid foundation. So I'm going to add 2bc cos A to both sides and subtract a squared from both sides, giving me And now to get the cos A on its own, I'm going to divide both sides by 2bc. So I've not even started the question, I've just set myself up by writing the two equations. Now I'm going to label the triangle. Always label the unknown you are trying to find A. In this case, because it's an angle, it'll be capital A, therefore this is little a, the opposite length is little a. Doesn't matter which way around, but I'll do it this way, and it's labelled. Now all I have to do is substitute in the values, and as you know, I will always do it this way as a matter of course whenever I'm doing any substitution. And I can just substitute in my values. And we'll put this into our calculator and you'll get a value. But don't forget, you haven't found the angle A, it's cos A. So whatever this is here, to find the unknown angle, remember it will be the shift button, and whatever your answer was here will give you A. The key point with this question, the sine rule and the cosine rule are easy marks if you, one, recognize that it isn't a right angle and can't be made into a right angle, therefore it's either the sine or the cosine rule. Then you decide if it's got a known angle and a known opposite side, you know you're on for the sine rule, and if it hasn't, it's the cosine rule. Having decided it's the cosine rule, I would write this equation down and write this equation down, and then you've got your two equations as you need them. Now if you're very confident, of course, you'll have decided which of these two, whether you need to bother with this, but what I'm giving you is just straightforward steps. And if, of course, it's a bit late in the day now, but if you were used to doing this with every cosine question, you'd have these two versions definitely memorized by now. The third step, or the next step, is to label the triangle, and the key here is always start with your unknown, and that way it guarantees that the A is always going to be in the right place for solving these formulas. So your unknown is always A, and then you're simply going to substitute into the formula and solve, bearing in mind that this formula does not give you A, it gives you A squared. So you will have to take the root of whatever you find, and bear in mind that this formula does not give you the angle A, but cos A. So you'll have to do the inverse function, inverse cos, to find the actual angle.